In 1980, Marvel Comics killed Jean Grey in one of the most famous endings in comic book history. But Jean was never supposed to die. The final pages had already been drawn. The X-Men were supposed to save her. Jean would lose her cosmic powers and she would go home alive. Then Marvel's editor-in-chief read those pages and refused to publish them because Jean Grey had just destroyed an inhabited world. She had killed 5 billion people, and she could not simply lose her powers and walk back into the X-Mansion as if nothing had happened. The ending was thrown out. Pages were redrawn. Dialogue was rewritten, and Jean Grey was sentenced to death. That's the version of this story you've probably heard. One tyrant editor, one murdered character. But that version leaves out the strangest detail of all. Because when the creators were told to find another ending, the person who suggested killing Jean may not have been the editor at all. It may have been the man who created her greatest story. And to this day, the two of them still don't agree on what happened in that room. To understand why this mattered so much, you have to understand that the X-Men were not always Marvel's biggest franchise. They were a failure. The original series sold so badly that in 1970, Marvel stopped publishing new X-Men stories altogether. For 5 years, the book survived on nothing but reprints of old issues. Then in 1975, Giant Size X-Men #1 relaunched the concept with a new international team, and writer Chris Claremont slowly turned the series into something the genre had never really seen. Under Claremont, the X-Men weren't just superheroes who punched villains. They were friends, rivals, outsiders, and increasingly, a deeply dysfunctional family. Jean Grey was one of the original 5. As Marvel Girl, she had telepathy and telekinesis, but she was rarely written as the most important member of the team. That changed in X-Men #101. After flying a crippled space shuttle through lethal solar radiation to save her friends, Jean rose out of the water in a new costume and declared that she was no longer Marvel Girl. She was Phoenix, fire and life incarnate. And for the first time, Jean Grey had power on a cosmic scale. She could reshape matter, cross the galaxy, and potentially rewrite reality itself. Marvel had just turned a supporting character into something close to a god, which created a problem nobody had thought through. Here's the problem with giving one character godlike power. Everyone else becomes useless. According to John Byrne, the artist and co-plotter on the book, Phoenix was becoming so powerful that the rest of the X-Men were turning into, in his words, fifth wheels in their own comic. Why would you need Cyclops or Storm or Wolverine when Jean could simply think a problem out of existence? And this is where one of the least known moments in the whole saga happens. Byrne has said the solution came from a conversation with the writer Steve Grant, who asked a very simple question. Why not make her a villain? That one question is the seed of everything that followed. Because if Jean was too powerful to be a teammate, she could still be the perfect enemy. Claremont and Byrne began building toward a much darker idea. What actually happens when a fundamentally decent human being is handed unlimited power? Not a villain who wants to conquer the world. A good person who slowly stops being able to tell the difference between wanting something and taking it. Jean's fall was not instant, and it was not entirely her fault. She was targeted by Mastermind and the Hellfire Club. Using his illusion powers, boosted by a device built by Emma Frost, Mastermind fed Jean a false life. He made her believe she was reliving the memories of an ancestor in another century. He preyed on her desires, loosened her grip on reality, and tried to remake her as the Hellfire Club's Black Queen. And eventually, Jean broke free. But when she broke free, everything holding her power in check broke with her. Jean became Dark Phoenix. Not evil in the ordinary comic book sense. Something worse. A being of pure appetite, driven by sensation and hunger rather than any human sense of right and wrong. And at this point, this was still a story that could be walked back. Jean had been manipulated. Her friends might reach her. Professor Xavier might contain her. Then the comic crossed a line it could never come back from. Dark Phoenix left Earth and flew into deep space. Starving for energy, she found a star and she ate it. The star went nova, and it took an inhabited planet with it. The victims were the Dabari, an alien civilization of 5 billion people. You'll often hear this number given as 4 billion, including from Claremont himself in later interviews, but the comic on the page is explicit. 5 billion. And crucially, Claremont and Byrne did not hide it behind an abstract explosion. They showed you the Dabari. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, looking up at a sky that was about to kill all of them. Dark Phoenix had committed genocide. Then a Shi'ar warship arrived to stop her, and she destroyed that too, but not before it transmitted a warning to the Shi'ar Empress. So now the entire galaxy knew, and that sequence gave the story enormous stakes. It also created a problem the creative team had not solved. Could Jean Grey still be a hero after killing 5 billion people? Does mind control absolve her? Does cosmic corruption? And if the X-Men welcome her home anyway, what exactly does that say about the X-Men? Marvel's editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, read the ending they had drawn and decided it did not answer a single one of those questions. So what was the ending Shooter rejected? In the original version of issue 137, Jean lives. After Professor Xavier helps suppress Dark Phoenix, the Shi'ar put Jean on trial. The X-Men invoke a ceremonial challenge and fight the Shi'ar Imperial Guard for her life. And in that first version, the battle ends with Jean captured, not killed. The Shi'ar then perform what the script itself called a psychic lobotomy, permanently stripping away her mutant powers. Jean survives. Phoenix is gone. And Scott Summers, Cyclops, leaves the X-Men to go with her, so the two of them can finally have a quiet life together. Now, that was not meant to be a happy ending with no cost. Jean loses the power that had defined her. Scott gives up his place on the team. And some of the people involved genuinely saw Dark Phoenix as something closer to a possessing force, which would make Jean another one of its victims rather than its author. But Shooter did not think that distinction survived contact with the actual page, because what a reader sees is simpler and much uglier. Jean took the power. Jean burned 5 billion people. And then Jean got to go home. This is the part that gets flattened into a single sentence online. Jim Shooter ordered Marvel to kill Jean Grey. The truth is stranger. Shooter's objection was about proportion. He has compared letting Jean off to stripping a dictator of his army and then handing him his country back. He also made a character argument that is harder to dismiss. Would Storm really sit down to dinner with someone who had killed billions and pass the salt? But here is what most retellings leave out. In Shooter's own account, death was not his idea. His first suggestion was prison. Lock Jean in a Shi'ar maximum security facility forever. And Claremont shot it down for a very practical reason. The X-Men would never abandon her. Every future issue becomes a jailbreak. They rescue her, she gets recaptured, they rescue her again forever. As Claremont put it, the book would go around and around in circles. So Shooter told Claremont to go and find another ending, and this is where the two men split. Shooter says Claremont came back the next morning, said the only answer was to kill Phoenix, and was visibly startled when Shooter agreed. Shooter believes Claremont was bluffing, and that he called the bluff. Claremont remembers it differently. He says killing Jean was his call, and that Shooter never demanded her death, only that she could not be let off with a magic zap machine. Both men agree on the constraint. Both agree death was chosen in that room. They simply do not agree on whose idea it was. And John Byrne, who loved the character, was not happy about it at all. And this was not a comfortable rewrite. Issue 137 was almost at the printer. Byrne had already penciled the original ending. Work on the next issue had already started. And on top of that, the book was changing editors in the middle of the crisis, with Louise Simonson taking over the X-Men on this exact issue. So the team had to rebuild the climax of their masterpiece under brutal deadline pressure. The final 5 pages were thrown out and rebuilt as 6. Claremont went back through the whole issue rewriting dialogue so that every theme now pointed towards sacrifice instead of survival. Byrne drew the new ending. Terry Austin inked it, and because the new ending ran a page longer, something had to be cut to make room. What got dropped was a behind-the-scenes text piece that Byrne himself had written. In the published version, Jean realizes Dark Phoenix is coming back. She understands she is going to lose control again, and that when she does, another world dies. So on the moon, inside the blue area, an ancient city built by the Kree, Jean triggers a Kree weapon. Cyclops understands what she is about to do. He cannot reach her in time, and Jean kills herself before Dark Phoenix can take the wheel. The editor's demand had been about punishment. What the creators actually delivered was agency. Jean isn't executed by her friends. She isn't condemned by an alien court. She decides. She saves the universe from the thing she is afraid of becoming. Jean Grey's death landed like a bomb. Today, a dead superhero is a scheduling decision. In 1980, killing a founding X-Man was close to permanent, and readers understood it that way. That forced ending is a large part of why the Dark Phoenix saga stopped being a good superhero story and became a tragedy. It is also a large part of why the X-Men became one of the biggest franchises Marvel has ever had. And then, in April 1984, Marvel did something remarkable. they published the ending they had thrown away. Phoenix, the untold story, reprinted issue 137 with the original pages where Jean lives, plus a long round-table conversation with Claremont, Byron, Austen, Shooter, and the editors, arguing about the decision in print. Readers could finally compare the two versions directly, and the comparison is brutal because it shows how completely the meaning changed. The original ending offers rehabilitation. The published ending offers sacrifice. Only one of those is the ending anybody remembers. But in superhero comics, even a death that everyone means to be permanent turns out to be negotiable. By the mid-1980s, Marvel wanted to reunite the 5 original X-Men in a new book called X-Factor, which left one obvious obstacle. Jean Grey was dead. The escape hatch came from an unlikely place. The idea originated with Kurt Busiek, who was a college student at the time. He passed it to Roger Stern, Stern passed it to John Byrne, and together they took it to Shooter. And it worked. Across Avengers number 263 and Fantastic Four number 286 in 1986, Marvel revealed that the real Jean Grey never became Phoenix at all. When that shuttle crashed, a cosmic entity, the Phoenix Force, copied Jean's body, her memories and her personality, and hid the real Jean in a healing cocoon at the bottom of Jamaica Bay. The being that became Dark Phoenix, that burned the D'Bari, that died on the moon, genuinely believed it was Jean Grey. But the actual Jean had been asleep under the water in New York the entire time. This cleared Jean of the genocide and let her come back as a hero. It also broke her history permanently, and notice what it quietly undid. In 1980, Phoenix was Jean. That was the whole point. A good person destroyed by her own power. The retcon turns her into a bystander in her own tragedy. Decades of writers have been rearranging that relationship ever since. Marvel could resurrect Jean's body in a single issue. Separating Jean from the Phoenix has taken 40 years, and it still isn't finished. So did an editor kill Jean Grey? Yes and no. Jim Shooter killed the ending where she survived. He decided that 5 billion dead required a consequence that actually cost something. But he did not hand Claremont a death sentence and walk away. He closed every exit. Jean could not be cured. Jean could not quietly go home. Jean could not commit genocide and then resume her old life without permanently changing the moral rules of the entire comic. And when Claremont came back with death, whoever's idea it actually was, Shooter refused to let anyone retreat from it. That single argument forced 3 creators to throw away finished work and rebuild the ending of their masterpiece at the last possible moment. It should have wrecked the story. Instead, Claremont, Byrne, and Austen produced one of the most influential final acts in superhero comics. Jean Grey's death was never in the plan. It came out of a fight about power, guilt, and whether being beloved is enough to escape what you have done. Which leaves one question worth arguing about. Was Shooter right, or did Marvel destroy the better story, the one where Jean has to live with what she did? Tell me which ending you would have published.